We're going to get started. The room is fairly full. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. This is an event put on by QuotaPath in partnership with the RevOps Co-op, and we're going to be talking about comp plans, everybody's favorite topic. We've got a really amazing panel, like seriously, the star power on this panel is next level. So everyone that is here is really blessed and lucky to learn from this group. So let's start out with intros. I want to hear from the host first, and then through the panelists, and then we'll jump right into it.
Awesome. Thanks, Sebastian. That's me. Yeah, we're going to be talking about comp plans, specifically talking about how to evaluate comp plans for maximum performance. This was originally I think that we had thought that this was maybe going to be earlier in the year because we were talking about mid-year evaluations, but we're actually like approaching Q4. So people may have started already building their comp plans for next year. But yeah, thanks, Sebastian. I think great to start off with an introduction from the panel. And just because we always do the like, oh, should I go? Should you? I'm going to just say on screen here, I've got Ryan, Rosalind, and Jessica. So I don't know if it's alphabetical or what, but let's go in that order. Ryan, you can kick us off.
Sounds great. Thank you, Graham. Hi, everyone. Ryan Milligan, Senior Director of RevOps here at QuotaPath. We are already starting to think about comp plans for next year. I'm already starting to do some of the math. So a very prevalent and fun topic. I have a fun kind of meta job. I get to build comp plans in QuotaPath for the QuotaPath team, which is a commission tracking tool. So it's a fun double whammy for me. So I'm really excited about this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, cool. So I'm Rosalind Santa Elena. For those of you who know me, I actually started out my RevOps journey in sales compensation. So super near and dear to my heart. I've really run end-to-end comp at multiple companies. So this is definitely a passion topic for me. So I'm super excited to be here.
And I'm Jessica Zangri. I represent Zangri. So we are a no-code data syncing platform. I started my digital transformation career back in the early aughts when Dreamforce was still one side of the Moscone Center. So I've touched every single portion of the go-to-market function. But sales ops has always been near and dear to my heart. So now that we're in this RevOps revolution, I think sales compensation is a very, very important topic, and I'm excited to talk about it with y'all today.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks for everybody else. I saw that I think the Red Hot Chili Peppers are playing Dreamforce this year, so I guess it's a music festival now.
Yeah, that was the first one that I saw in like 2006, I think they played.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, there we go. I guess they've done this for a while. So cool. Well, thank you for all of our panelists. Super excited to chat with each of you. I have a whole list of questions that we brainstormed, but if this goes like most panels I've been a part of, we'll probably get through one or two of them, and we will have all kinds of other topics. So the initial thing that I wanted to talk about was the evaluation of comp plans. We had said mid-year comp plan evaluation. I know we're a little bit past mid-year now, so it may be a little bit too late for that. But I guess my question would be, did you do mid-year comp plan evaluations? And if you did, or if you're currently doing them, how do you go about doing that? And I guess anybody can speak up, but Ryan, you are on my screen, so you're up first.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So the first question, yes, absolutely. I think that one of the couple of ways that we started the process, one is just when you start at the beginning of the year, what did you expect outcomes to be? So on the AE side, what was your expectation on quota attainment? On the AM side, what were you thinking was just overall payouts or that process, because it's less of a quota attainment question and more a payout versus target question. And really what you're looking at for us was, one, from just a mathematical perspective, did you pay people what you expected to pay them according to your financial plan? If you think about, hey, you're trying to get 80% quota attainment, what did that look like? And what was the outcome for each member of the team? And then the second level, which I think is actually almost more important, is did the actions you were trying to get people to do, were they doing them at the rate you were hoping, right? So in our couple examples, kind of thematically at QuotaPath, we're really trying to get into longer term agreements with our customers. So we are incentivizing our account executives when they're selling deals with increased rates to sell 2-3 year deals. We're incentivizing our account managers to convert annual contracts from 2 to 3 years. So like, what was our expectation at the beginning of the year as to how much ARR we were able to sell or convert at those longer periods? And from there, how much did we actually achieve and what did we pay out? And was that our target outcome? And once you have that in mind, you can basically see some things you did really well. Like we definitely got our AMs to convert a bunch of shorter term contracts into longer contracts, which is great for revenue predictability for our business. And then you can see some things that necessarily didn't go as well as you wanted them to. And then think about, okay, how are you going to adjust your plans either for the back half of this year or early next year?
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I know, Rosalind, you have, but I know that you have slightly different background and in your current work environment. And so maybe this question isn't perfectly relevant for you, but I guess more about like in general at organizations where you have run compensation.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say that, I love the fact that Ryan said, that he's evaluating not just payouts, but evaluating how, outcomes, right, in terms of objectives. And I think that, I think a lot of companies make that mistake of doing that, what's working, what's not evaluation in Q4 to roll out something in Q1, right? But assessing your comp plan effectiveness is something you should be doing throughout the year, right? You should be doing it all along the year. It's not a one and done thing. It's a constant evaluation, because we all know what Q4 looks like for everyone in terms of trying to juggle the business, trying to plan for next year. There's just a million things that you have to do in a very short amount of time. And what happens, you rush through the comp structure, you roll out something that's half baked. You don't communicate it well. You don't set it up to be successful. If you don't spend the time and the due diligence in building out, what's really, really working and what you really want to go and motivate for the next year. So you should constantly be doing it. If you think about every quarter or every month when you're assessing payments, my advice would just be, as you're assessing payments and attainment, have those discussions as well, right? In terms of the comp plan structure, and are they really, are you achieving the goals that you were expecting to see? Are you trending at least towards the things that you were expecting? Ryan used the example of multi-year contracts or longer term contracts. So then are you seeing more of that in your pipeline, right? Are you seeing more in your, in opportunities? And just to make sure that you're directionally moving forward, not to say that you're going to change comp structures. 1 quarter is not enough time to assess, or even 2 quarters, but it's to make sure that you're doing the things that you would normally try to scramble to do and answer all those questions in Q4, right? With like a couple weeks to go. I think that's really important. And, one thing Ryan touched on was around the outcomes. And that's kind of where my brain goes too. There's payouts and there's quotas and quota attainment and all of that we all know it's a numbers game, right? We can adjust that how we want, where we want the sort of that bell curve to land. But if you think about, I want more multi-year contracts, I want more, selling more of this new product that's more difficult. I want to move into a new geography or move up market, right? Whatever those key objectives from your go-to-market strategy are, those are the things you want to see. Is the comp plan driving those outcomes, driving us directionally toward those outcomes? That's my soapbox 2 cents. But so main takeaway, just constantly be evaluating. You should always be looking at the data and the analytics.
I'm going to add some rungs to that soapbox, Rosalind. Yeah, I love it. It's annual plans. Every time you nail it, because when you said annual plans are done once a year, annual plans are never done once a year, right? You constantly have to be iterating and looking at it. So here's an example about driving outcomes, right? We're also, I think I would guess most of us on this call, especially in the RevOps Co-op community, are in a recurring revenue type of model, right? So one of our incentives is to we need recurring revenue. So that incentive is to get those multi-year deals. So in order to model effectively, so this is where my role as a RevOps leader is critical. Is I need to model effectively. I need to pay people just as well as I need to model the business. So when I'm looking at my models, I want to say, okay, how can I make sure that 80% of my deals don't close the last week of the quarter? Can I incentivize people to say, hey, I'm going to pay you a little bit more if you do it in month 1, maybe in month 2, right? So my objective was to normalize my model. It wasn't to sell multi-year deals, right? Because guess what happened? When I put that in place, still 80% of the deals were closed in the last week of the quarter, right? So those are the types of things that you learn, especially as somebody that sets up sales comp plans, is it's the objective in mind, and not how to normalize the numbers.
I think the other piece I've been thinking about a lot with how's performance, objective outcomes, and I agree 100%. I've also been spending a lot of time like talking to reps about how they feel about their comp plans. So I know we'll get into a little bit more, but like, do you feel like the comp plan is fair to you? Do you feel like you are incentivized to do the right things? Do you, what some what if scenarios if this rate of change, or like getting feedback from the team is one thing that I spend a lot of time on with comp plan efficacy. Because if the rep is not feeling motivated by what you're trying to get them to do, especially with reps who aren't necessarily driving the outcome, the question is why? And you can pretty quickly figure out it's because they're just not having success, which is one problem. They love the plan, but they're not being successful in it, or they just like don't feel motivated by those extra couple points you're giving them to sign a 2 or 3 year deal. And then it's like, okay, how do I make this more lucrative for you to really motivate you to drive that outcome?
Or they don't understand it. I think that's another core one, is that you see a 30-page comp plan, and nestled in page 24 is this part about how you double your commission rate if you close a 2-year deal. Reps maybe miss that, and so that's where I get on my soapbox. I've got plenty of soapboxes. Keep a stack next to my desk about simplicity of comp plans. So I'm curious, Ryan, clearly talking to reps is important for you. Rosalind, Jessica, I'd love to hear about that and how you go about that, and how you message it in a way that isn't like scaring reps of like, hey, we're thinking about changing your comp plan, because that always sends red flags for reps.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what Jessica thinks. I just wanted to, but I think just a comment that Graham, my brain exactly went there too as Ryan started talking about it. I'm like, and asking the reps even if they understand their comp plan and how they actually get paid. I still remember I would share the story years back. This was back in 2001, I guess, where we were like at a kickoff, and a rep stood up and said, I have a bleeping MBA and I can't understand my comp plan, right? And so I still remember that because it really sat with me, really, really reminded me of just always about simplicity, being really clear with communication, being really good with sort of the tools to help participants or comp participant, anybody on the comp plan, really understand how they get paid and be able to model on their own, right? Something as simple as giving them an Excel calculator or having a tool or technology that they can go and model these things is just so, it's so fundamental, and it sounds so basic, but so many people don't do it. Right. Just giving them something that they can plug in their forecast, plug in their, what their pipeline looks like, and be able to see, I'm going to, this is how much I'm going to earn in commissions. And by the way, if I now sell multi-year, or I go do better linearity and book it in month 1, then I'm going to get even more incremental dollars. And just to, help to kind of understand that. But I think that feedback is really important. And it's not something, again, along the journey, right, along the year, but especially formally doing that feedback gathering at the beginning of the planning cycle. So if you are doing that in Q4, you are sitting down with your leaders and saying, okay, here was the comp structure. Here's what we set out to do. Here's the results through Q3 and where we're expected people to land at the end of Q4, at the end of the year. And then what can we do better? What really worked well and what didn't, and where should we tweak?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Rosalind, I mean, this is 2022. I am blessed to be creating comp plans in 2022 and not building some Frankenstein macro Excel, pretending.
What, you did comp in Excel? Yeah, I've been there. The 30 tabs across. Yeah.
Yeah, the understanding is huge, because I think somebody asked the question is how do you solicit the feedback from the sales reps, right? What I've also learned too is when you have that a tool that's really clear and really, really concise, like everybody wants us to hit our numbers, right? We want our reps to get paid. We want our reps to get paid. That's the bread and butter of our business. So we want it to be clear. We don't want to say, hey, your deal is going to close twice as fast when you bring in a partner, but that's really complicated, so I'm not even going to go there. So I'm just going to do it myself, right? Because it's not clear. What I've also found is that sales reps tend to give their ops counterparts more honest feedback than they do their sales managers sometimes. So I think that loop is really, really important to have that trust, whether your sales ops, your rev ops, your finance ops, to have that loop, even with your SDRs, guys. Don't forget about our SDRs and people that might make commissions outside of just closing those incremental dollars. So I think that's really important.
Yeah. I was smiling, Rosalind, when you were talking about a calculator, because the fun part for us is like we have all our reps in QuotaPath can see all their deals and can forecast what they're going to earn, which is like all of our customers have that ability, which has been like massively valuable in that too, right? So like a rep can see for every single deal that she has in her pipeline, forecast the close and forecast how much money she's going to make if she goes about closing that. Like that's really what we're trying to build around here, is like the ability for reps to be able to do that and see, okay, here's how much money I make if I go ahead and close these deals. And so, yeah, I've built a bunch of those calculators before, and I'm excited to like move the team from a calculator to like be in our products and play around with that, which has been super helpful for both us kind of and our customers. And I think the other thing, I love the one-on-one question. Like I do one-on-ones with our reps all the time. So I think it's ops responsibility I'm in a, basically monthly one-on-ones with all of our reps. And I'm asking them questions about not only how outbounding's going, how op funnel pipeline's going, what snags are you hitting. I'm dogfooding those processes for them. And then I'm trying to figure out like, how are you feeling about commissions? What questions do you have that can I answer, what have you? And the simplicity thing is huge for that, right? Like if you ask a rep on our team and account executive on our team, how do you earn commissions? It is there's one of 8 rates. They can only earn one of 8 rates. And there's a table that shows, okay, if you're above 100, if you're below 100% of your quota, these are the rates you can have. If you're above 100%, here are the rates you can have. And then you get rates for, annual 2-year, 3-year deals. So it's I think that simplicity that Graham pointed on is like massively, massively important. And it's like, would you want this comp plan? Right? That's the question that I ask a lot. Like, if I was selling, would I be thrilled about this comp plan? And I would be super happy with any comp plan that we've given our team, and that should be the burden of proof for anybody building a comp plan, honestly.
I will caution, I'll be kind of the devil's advocate here and caution that in my experience, Jessica, I love you calling out our SDRs. I ran about a 45-person SDR team at my last company, and I took a lot of feedback, and what people thought they would motivate them is not always what will motivate them. And so definitely take it with a grain of salt as we're having these conversations. Absolutely. But I love the point about sales reps trusting RevOps a lot more than trusting it or being more open about these conversations than they might be with their sales leaders or especially their finance team. Based on some primary research we've done regarding how much you trust how confident you are in the build of your comp plan, RevOps is number one. Comp plans built by RevOps have the highest value or have the highest rating of trust, that they are built properly and that they're going to get paid properly and they're paid for their work. I have my theories about why that is. I'm curious, does anybody on the panel have feelings as to like why RevOps is so trustworthy? I'm preaching to the choir here. This is really pandering here. Sorry, team.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I think, we are the closest to the business, right? We're the closest to the day-to-day operations. We know what's happening, and we're really the bridge between strategy, corporate strategy at the executive level and the tactical operations day-to-day at every level, right? At an AE level, SDR, account management, SE, whomever in the go-to-market, including, marketing as well as if they are comp structures as well, and your post-sales team. And I think because we are the ones who enable the folks, we're the closest to them, we help them day to day, we build that trust, right? And I think I'm not surprised at all that comp structures that are designed by RevOps are the highest rated, because who better to, create frameworks around comp structures that will support the business than the folks who are actually supporting the strategy, right? And the execution. And the fact that we typically are also responsible for administering the plans, setting the quotas, doing the books of business, right? All of those things means, that we really have a strong, not just pulse, but just a very, very comprehensive understanding of all of the facets that need to go into a comp structure.
Yeah, there's like a neutral arbiter point too that Rosalind touched on, which I love, which is like finance. If you think about the perceptions, whether they're true or not, often finance is perceived as trying to save the most money for the company and be most cash conservative. Sales can be possibly perceived as trying to pay the team as much as possible and motivate and drive sales outcomes. RevOps, to Rosalind's point, is only concerned about the strategy of the business and executing the strategy with regards to comp plan. So there's no motive there. And then that's when I'm building I build comp plans for our team with our VP of sales and our VP of finance, and Graham knows a lot, so he jumps into and helps, and the four of us do our comp plans. And so you can kind of take the objectives from everybody involved and just be really a neutral arbiter, and somebody who is only concerned about the outcome of the business. And I think the other piece is for RevOps, RevOps is especially with comp, it's like a high risk, it can be a high risk, low reward situation where if you lose trust from your reps, you're going to then lose trust with all of the other processes you're trying to build, outbound processes and, demo recording processes and demo booking processes and round robins, everything you have to do to treat your team fairly. And so RevOps is going to go above and beyond to show why they think things are fair, to show fairness. That's where I spend a lot of my time and how I do that in comp as well.
I think that another contributing factor is that a lot of RevOps people come from a sales background as well. I joke that people get into RevOps the old-fashioned way, which is be a sales rep and be more interested in the ops side of things than in closing deals. That's the old-fashioned way to get into RevOps. So I think that's a contributing factor as well, that they've carried a bag and they so you have that credibility. Although I don't know if anybody, Jessica, have you ever carried a bag? Have you ever actually worked in a quota carrying sales role?
You know what? I have not.
I was going to say, I wonder if I'm the only one here who has.
We're like, what are you talking about, Graham?
I'm the anomaly. I started off in the information system side. But that being said, that still carries a whole lot of objective, truth holding, right? Yeah. So there's no data doesn't lie. So that's why I built my career on, data doesn't lie. So that's where I think that other persona of RevOps is really important.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so we've spent quite a bit of time talking about who's building the plans and whatnot. I'm going to try to spark a little controversy here by talking about the iterating of comp plans. We talked about that a little bit of I ran a BDR team. At my last company, we rolled out a new comp plan at the beginning of the year, and it was so terrible I had to completely rip it out after about three months and drastically completely change the comp plan. Unless I'm misremembering, Rosalind, I think that you're pretty opposed to drastic changes to comp plans mid-year. Not like anybody loves it. Can you talk a little bit about the iterating and how you go about doing that without blowing up the entire sales process?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Whenever you're changing comp structures, anybody's pay for you, any of us, right, including any roles. Whenever you're changing somebody's comp, it can be highly, highly disruptive. Right. And especially for go-to-market, it's extremely disruptive if you're shifting comp plans, quotas, targets, accounts, right? Anytime you're changing anything, especially in go-to-market, can be extremely disruptive. I think from a comp plan structure perspective, if you do the plan right, if you design properly, you're you're evaluating all through the year. You're very clear on your go-to-market strategy, which is really important. I would say everything ties back to the strategy, right? Everything has to point back to that, even whatever we're doing day to day. You go back to the strategy and you've aligned your roles for each of the, you may have 10 roles on your team, right? And go to market, you could have more, you could have less, but whatever those roles are, and you've been super clear on the objective of those roles, what are the top 2 or 3 things we want these folks to go after for the new year, then you're building a comp plan that's sustainable, right? And so you want to build the plan that you're rolling it out once and you're not changing comp structure. So changing, adding things incrementally, or even maybe changing quotas, like we all had to do it with the pandemic, 2020. I'm sure folks are now looking at it, towards the end of this year, trying to figure out what do we need to do differently next year. Quotas are one thing that also, obviously you don't want to shift if you don't have to, but I think that probably happens more often than comp structure. So when I talk about comp plan, I think about structures in terms of, okay, I'm an AE, I'm a an enterprise account executive. My goal is to go after net new accounts, right? And then drive expansion within my existing accounts. Those fundamentals shouldn't change. Right. And so I think what those goals are shouldn't change. And if you decide mid-year to say, oh, I don't want you to go focus on expansion, I'm going to shift that all to an account management team, I'm going to build that. It could be the right thing for the business, but can also be very disruptive, because then you have to think about, how do I bridge all of those things? How do I grandfather the accounts that they're already working? There's all this complexity that I think if you can avoid it, you want to avoid it, right? If there's something that you can move to the next year. So what I've done kind of in the past, instead of changing structure, if you're feeling that, in Ryan's example of multi-year contracts, right? Maybe the incentive wasn't enough to really move the needle. Mid-year, you're seeing that, you're like, I don't see any difference. Reps are just saying, oh, it's too difficult to sell multi-year contracts, I'm just not going to do it. It's not worth it for the extra couple points or whatever the incentive is. Or you find that they're behaving badly and discounting ARR too much, right? In order to get the multi-year, then you're losing out. So other creative ways to handle that, right? Versus changing the structure, right? You can tweak the rates, you can tweak the multipliers, you can add, hey, a quarterly spiff, just for any multi-year deals closed this quarter, we're going to give some kind of kicker, right? To drive some of that additional, give it a little bit more push to go do the right things, versus being disruptive in terms of changing the actual structure. And especially if you're going the opposite way, right? Giving more money is an easy conversation.
Yeah, I was
right?
going to say, that's what I was going to ask, was like,
giving more money.
This is an easy one. Oh, we're increasing the commission rate. It's the
Exactly.
opposite way that can be very challenging.
Yeah. It's the opposite way that you start to say, okay, well, I'm paying too much on these type of multipliers, right? Maybe you find out, okay, I modeled incorrectly, and now I'm paying a lot more for multi-year than I expected, right? So that's obviously a comp plan design issue. But when that happens, I think you need to need to weigh out the pros and cons and figure out what the total cost is going to look like. Is it worthwhile to demotivate the team by taking something away at this point? Maybe it's halfway through the year, or is it better to continue the plan through the end of the year and then tweak for next year?
Yeah, I think and I've had a couple conversations with customers about this, especially with, hey, we're seeing massive misses of quota from our team. The market is deflating. Like, I got reps at 15. I got, an average of 15% attainment. Like, what am I to do? Right. And I think that is, to me, where if you're trying to get your team in better shape, and the goal is to have the team be able to have a better path to making money, that to me is the only real time when mid-year you can actually change the structure of the comp plan. And this is why I would think that if you're going to increase let's say you're paying a 10% commission rate, but you're realizing that, reps are just not hitting quota nearly at all and not making the money they need to, and you say you're going to cut quotas by a third, or you're going to bring them down to a third, then at that point you're paying like a 30% commission rate, right? And so then I think if you're doing something where you're trying to help your team to have a better path to their money, that is when you can, in parallel, narrow the aperture of potential earnings, right? Like, and those are some conversations that customers are having with me, who are saying, hey, I want to give, on a regular comp plan, they are, there's an unlimited path to, I don't like commission caps personally. I don't think they're very valuable. I don't think, I'm not a fan of that.
Graham's doing the thumbs down.
Yeah.
I don't see the thumbs down emoji, but
yeah, that was in an agreement. That was a yes, commission caps are a no-go for me.
Yeah,
not a disagreement with Ryan.
I think that the question becomes then, okay, if you're moving the base rate to a rate that is like not necessarily sustainable for the long term of your business, then the question becomes, okay, what do you do to make sure that you're kind of like more tightening the range of potential earning? If you're lifting the team up, right, to like an unnatural high, then how do you make sure that you're also not going to pay if this quarter they happen to do really, really well and blow out quotas that you're not paying an unsustainable amount for the business, right? So like those are the kind of questions where if you're restructuring a comp plan to benefit your team, then you can think about having conversations about, okay, how do we make sure that we're narrowing the aperture of earnings because I'm lifting the team up so heavily? And that's like the only time when I would think, okay, because you're presenting something that benefits the end seller dramatically, how do you then make sure that you're also not paying 35% commission rate for, millions of dollars of ARR that's like putting your business bankrupt, right? Like that's also not the play you want to take either.
Yeah, I was just going to say, especially with the market, right? When we talked about kind of the pandemic and this year, the downturn, I think if there's a huge, external factor, something in the market that's happening, it's going to affect everything in your company, right? You're going to relook at your growth targets. You may even shift your plan in terms of, your revenue numbers that you're expecting to hit, which will have that downstream impact, right? That domino effect of everything else kind of shifting. And then the motivational factor, I think, Ryan, that you kind of touched on a little bit, right? It's like if your plan isn't motivating or providing the right outcomes, there's a reason to take a look at it.
I like, Rosalind, that you distinguished iteration versus evaluation, right? We should constantly be evaluating, but as soon as anything changes with process, especially when it comes to our paychecks, who's the first person that's gonna get the finger pointed? Oh, it's the process. It's my systems. It's my tools, right? So I totally agree with you there. And then Ryan, constantly evaluating, like for example, if we want to close more multi-year deals, and I kick in an extra 2% incentive on top of my quota plan, if I'm just stopping there and looking at it and saying, okay, cool, we closed 50% more multi-year deals this quarter than ever because we incentivized my reps. Well, then what happened to those customers? Did they make it to onboarding? Did we overly incentivize them and say, oh, whoops, well, we didn't get ICP. We just said, okay, we paid our reps really well, but now we got all this churn. Now we got all this cancellation, right? So that's something that we can't forget about as RevOps leaders, is that it just doesn't stop at sale, at paycheck, because we need to make sure, we need to look back and say, hey, did this kick this kick in comp affect my ICP and affect my recurring revenue?
Yeah, we're talking a lot about account executive and SDR comp plans, but AMs or account managers is where it gets really tricky.
Yeah, especially for expansion and keeping those customers. That's really expensive. So we have to make sure, we keep a line of sight on that too.
Yeah, building account manager comp plans is always my least favorite type of comp plan to build. There are so many nuances, and and I guess might as well 30 minutes in introduce myself. I realized I never did that. I'm Graham, QuotaPath Chief of Staff. A big function of my role is that I sit down with sales leaders and help them build their compensation plans. And so that's on our website on QuotaPath.com. If you're interested, you're more than welcome to book some time with me. I've done over 400 comp plan consults. So anyway, now that we've got that introduction out of the way, we can dive in. This is like when you watch a TV show and you get like 10 minutes in and then finally the opening credits come on and you're like, whoa, I didn't realize that we were already. One thing that I wrote down pretty early on in the conversation that I'm curious about, because this gets asked a lot in those comp plan consults, is we threw out around the number 80%, and that number gets tossed around in relation to quota attainment, in relation to compensation payout. 80% of your reps hitting 80% or higher, I think is what Vista Equity tends to use. But I'm curious.
Oh, did it? I don't know if it's my connection, but we lost you. Yeah, for a second, Graham. We heard the 80-80.
Yeah,
and then it kind of went a little bit.
Yeah, we have an opinion around that, around where you want your reps hitting, where you want them getting paid out.
I think the question is like how, like, do you have a strong opinion on what you think payout, like attainment, should be for a team with a contract?
So I'll go ahead and start. So having worked in so many different sizes and stages of companies, I would say it's that kind of dreaded depends answer, and only because it depends on what stage you're at in your company. Because what are those targets, right? If you have super high growth targets, you have very low quotas, you have no idea how to set your targets, and you're just trying to kind of, you haven't even fully defined, your target market. And it's a whole different story, right, around where you want your reps to attain and where you want them to be, versus working for, a really large public company where you have, 2,000 reps and you have, books of businesses that are very stable, right? Kind of slow and, slow and steady growth. It's a different conversation, I think, in terms of where you want your reps to be. So I don't think there's a one size fits all. I don't know if this 80-80 is one size fits all. It didn't work for me, Graham, but it may be working for other people. So I'd like to hear kind of what other people think, but I just think there's no one size fits all, but you need to decide, right, what your comp philosophy is for your company and for this year, and figure out what that curve looks like, right? Because again, it's a numbers game. You could have everybody hitting target, right? Or you can have nobody hitting target. You can figure that out based upon your growth targets and how you set quotas.
I love that ops answer. It's every time there's a long pause and a sigh, it's always followed by depends. Because I have if I had 80-80 for my scale up,
easy to model everything, right?
Yeah, scale up Zangri, I would not be happy, right? But working at larger public companies, I think that's okay. I think 80 is kind of that nice middle, 80-20 rule just sounds all nice and warm and fuzzy, especially when it comes to, larger organizations, because you're always going to have those stretch goals, right? We all know that there's goals that we give, to ourselves, that we give to our manager, that we give to our CEO, that we give to the board, right? So I think kind of normalizing that, I've always gone with 80 as well. But in at Zangri, 80, nope, 100%. For our sales team, right, as our kind of growth scale up stage right now. So totally agree.
Yeah, I also think you have to think about what your financial, like the way that I try to back into it is, what's your financial plan for the growth of the business? How many reps do you have on the team? And then what attainment do you need to get to for your business in order to hit the financial plan that you're looking for, right? Like those are the levers that I would think a lot about, which is like, hey, in order to meet the financial plan that we've built, that we've talked to the board, as a function of how many reps, here's what attainment needs to be for us to hit that plan. I think it's hard to build a financial plan where you are. It also depends on it also does depend on the tenure of your reps too. Like if you're adding headcount pretty much consistently throughout the course of the year, having a lot of new reps hitting the floor, it's pretty hard to model and say, I think our plan relies on every single rep hitting 100% attainment, right? Like I think that's, you bring on new people on board, there's definitely some risk there. That can be definitely a challenge, even with ramping plans. And so I think the reason people gravitate to 80% is because, one, it looks like from an accuracy perspective, you're putting the right quota in place. And you have you feel like it's mathematically tied to a potential winning outcome for people involved. But my recommendation is really lay out your financial plan. Where do you want to exit the year in terms of revenue? How many reps do you have? How many reps are you planning on adding? And then flex with what your attainment would look like. How many reps would you need if they were at 40%, 60%, 80%? What does a scalable headcount growth plan look like for you? And with that, you can back into kind of your target based on rep headcount as well, right? So if it was 40%, you would need 2 times as many reps. You don't want 2 times as many reps all hitting 40%, probably not the best. No one's going to be thrilled long term. But that's kind of the trade-off you have to make when you're building the model. And to Jonathan's question, yes, we've seen a lot of capped commissions in conversations that we're trying to, we move people away from them. It's a lot of our conversation. Do not do capped commissions, please. And thank you. We've seen them a lot. They're not great.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions here from Holly. Holly Graham, I love the last name. The one around clawbacks, I can take a quick stab at. I try to avoid clawbacks as best I can. I think clawbacks can be one of the most expensive things that your company can do. They can be, because they demotivate reps. You talk
all kinds of reps talk about leaving because they had a deal clawed back. As far as how you handle them, there are a few different ways that I see it handled. One way is you just take however much they earned off of that one deal and then claw it back in the following quarter. Another way is to go retroactively as if they never closed that deal and then see how that changes their commission payout for that quarter and claw back that amount. The third way is to actually the following quarter claw back a deal amount. So say it was a $10,000 deal in Q1 that needed to be clawed back, you do a negative $10,000 deal in Q2 essentially. So it puts them in a bit of a hole, but it doesn't take away from all the other things. So there's a bunch of different ways, and obviously there are advantages to each of those. But I don't know if anybody else. Also, I hope you can hear me because I switched.
Yeah, we hear you. Yeah, you're good.
Wonderful. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of clawbacks. I think the only or caps. Yeah, I think with clawbacks, the only time that I think we would apply a clawback is if there was a true debooking, right, in terms of revenue, when an account truly, was never a good deal to begin with, right, and it debooked. But yeah, in terms of clawback, I think it really depends on your comp structure, right? If you have annual acceleration, then I think that putting it back in and kind of as if that deal, negative or in terms of that deal never happened and recalculating because you're looking at an annual, attainment and number for acceleration, that makes sense. Have seen it also just kind of taking, I don't think I've ever done the dollar amount backing out, kind of what that amount was for commission because it's always kind of an attainment rolling kind of number against a quota. But have seen sort of the other two examples that Graham shared.
In B2B SaaS, I've never seen a clawback successfully be implemented. Especially, with clawbacks, it's every go-to-market function's responsibility at that point. So I don't know what specific type of go-to-market motion we're talking about, but for B2B SaaS, I've never seen it work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the language that I tend to use is that like you have to try pretty hard to have your deal clawed back. It has to be like a deliberate missell or misrepresentation, or just like an egregious situation done by the salesperson. Because oftentimes, I've had deals debook before, but oftentimes it's because we changed the product or the CS team couldn't handle it or there was something else.
Use cases change, but that's everybody. I don't think that's directly tied to comp. I don't think clawback and comp like that. It's just it just doesn't make sense.
The one thing I will say is it's important then to have a really clear understanding of who, like the payment gathering process too. Like that's where I've seen clawbacks come up a couple times. I agree with the team. Like I'm not pro clawback in any capacity. I think with that in mind, you should have a very clear understanding of like who is responsible for ensuring payments. Does that come from an account manager or from the person booking the initial deal? Like how are you making sure that you have a really clear process in place for gathering payment? Because that is where customers have talked to me when I've done consults about clawbacks before. And it's because they hadn't had a really clear understanding of who's responsible for gathering something like payments.
Yep, for sure. Interesting question here around highly seasonal businesses. So we see this in e-com, we see this in people who sell to education, because I know that I sold to enough universities to know that they have a very seasonal buying cycle as well. How do you build a comp plan? How do you structure it so that you don't have that feast and famine where the rep makes 90% of their commission over the course of 2 months and then starves the rest of the year?
Yeah. Heavy sigh again. No.
And I have some opinions on it as well, but happy to hear other folks if you have expertise.
Yeah, I'll Jessica, it looks like you want to weigh in. I'll let you weigh in, and then I have a couple thoughts.
No, I think I'm gonna pass on. I'm gonna pass on this one because I think Graham and Rosalind have some better examples here.
Yeah. So for me, I think, part of sales is very lumpy, right? But being a salesperson is going to be lumpy. It's just by nature. You're going to have some really good months, some really good quarters, and then you're going to have some that aren't, right? So you're going to have sort of this cyclic kind of feast or famine. We talk about that a lot. So I think that's part of it's a natural part of being in a commissioned or variable type of role. But at the same time, if you are in an environment where it is highly, highly like back end loaded, hockey stick, we talk about a lot of that, or they're really, really long sales cycles, right? Or you're in a brand new market where you're just building out pipeline and you know that you're probably not going to close anything significant for months down the road. One way to kind of mitigate or help with the cash flow, just kind of helping with that, is obviously offering some kind of guarantee or draw, right? Kind of a recoverable draw so that you kind of smooth out that lumpiness a little bit, where they get a draw, and a true up, draw, true up, something like that. I think that's a way also for even a new rep, right? A lot of new reps have a draw when they come in to start building out their pipeline, but then also for any new markets, right? In some of these more lumpy type of roles. That's, one way to potentially help with that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you nailed it as far as the different things that I tend to see. Those draws, I try to avoid draws because they are very risky. If somebody leaves and then they don't pay it back, or they don't pay it back and you claw, all kinds of different things. But draws, the one time that I recommend draws are in those substantially lumpy periods, or, like you said, if somebody has a 18-month sales cycle and they only close one deal or 2 deals every 3 years or something like that.
Yeah. I think the other thing, just as you were speaking, Graham, I was thinking also in those newer markets, where, and I think this was a question maybe I think Holly had around the renewal focus versus sort of she came from Reno, so maybe the backwards, I'm thinking. But in some of those newer markets where that a deal isn't going to close, or not a significant deal that's going to close early on, a lot of those roles are more biz dev type of roles, right? Business development type of roles, where they're likely going to you can structure them with a much higher base, right? And less variable. Maybe it's at 80-20 to begin with, or even 90-10 to begin with, and then move them as their patch, or as that industry starts to mature, then you move them to more of a more highly leveraged type of plan.
What I would not do is set up a system in which you have like different rates based on time of year or something like that. And then to answer the reason, I mean, I know that can naturally come to your mind, like you get a higher rate for if you sell a deal in an off season, because you don't want to set up like you always want reps to be motivated to close the deal now. Like that's how I think about any comp plan. It's the same reason I don't believe in caps. It's the same reason, like, you always want, if the rep could get the contract signed today, she should get the contract signed today. And so like draws are a way to do that, which Graham talked about, Rosalind talked about. But a natural mathematical inclination is give the person a much higher rate in an off season, and that becomes dangerous because then now all of a sudden your deals are pushing into the time period when she can make the most money, and that's not good for revenue predictability for the business overall.
For newer, if you're selling into a newer market, where I actually am a little bit more okay with that, where it's like, hey, if you close it in Q1, you get substantially more than Q2, than Q3, than Q4, because following year Q1, it's not going to be high like it was in Q1.
Yeah.
For seasonality businesses, you're absolutely right, because why close it on February or on December 31st when I could close on January 1st and triple my commission rate?
Yeah.
Well, we only have a few minutes left here. And one of the questions that, for the folks who have stuck around the whole time, I'd love to get everybody's take on are the comp plan gotchas. As we're going into comp planning season, what are the things that everybody, no matter what, should be looking for in their comp plans to make sure that they're not making some sort of fatal flaw?
How much time do we have?
So I put it at the end so that we don't.
All the lessons learned, right? All the battle scars of things not to do. Do you want me to go ahead and start, or yeah? Okay. Well, we talked about no caps and no clawbacks, or avoid clawbacks. right? But I think really, really important when you're designing your comp structure is just to make sure you're really clear on your go-to-market strategy and your targets for the year, right? Really understand what those objectives are, and they all start there. And then they start to cascade to each role, right? And being really clear on each role. What is it that role should be tasked to do for the year? And there's tons of things like a rep, for example, an AE is going to be responsible for doing, or even account manager, right? They're going to be responsible for dozens and dozens of things, but not all of those things need to be tied to a dollar figure. And I would just remind everybody that comp should be very specific to be able to be measurable and be able to tie very, very clearly tied to an action that has an outcome that can be measured. And the simpler that you can make the comp structure, the better you're going to see performance, and the more the easier it's going to be for you to figure out if it's actually performing, right? Sort of that evaluation pieces. Because if they're so confusing that the rep doesn't understand it, you can't administer it, there's no way you're going to be able to really understand if it's performing well. So simplicity, no caps, and I think, and making sure you gather that feedback, right? Making sure you understand kind of the what worked and what's working and what's not. But even with feedback, I would just say be careful what you ask for, because if you're not planning to make any changes to the plan and that decision's already been made, don't ask for feedback, right? You don't need to go there, because if you're not going to take the feedback into consideration, then you don't want to set that expectation.
I can give mine, which involves more of my soapboxes that I mentioned. So I always say that comp plans should be simple, logical, and fair. And one thing that I see all the time is inconsistent comp plans across different people doing the same role. And what you have is different quotas, or higher quotas or lower quotas for higher base salaries, things like that. And based on a bunch of research, on average, if you do that, you end up underpaying women and people of color. And so the easiest way to prevent that is by standardizing your comp plans and having, this is your AE plan, this is your SAE plan, what have you. And so that's mine, is that gotcha, don't have an inconsistent comp plan.
I love it. Hashtag no cap. And for the no cap, think about like an iceberg, right? The comp is like just the tip of the iceberg, right? As a leader responsible for revenue operations, I'm also looking at, not just that top line payout, making sure it's fair, making sure it's simple, making sure it's repeatable, making sure everybody understands it's the same methodologies. But what are all the other things that go into how we get to that number, right? The rep activity, or my account penetration, my velocity, my, data activation, like all of the things that go into what those quotas should be. I want to make sure that I have a really, really tight story on how to tell that too, because it's all the things under that iceberg that go into what these payouts should be. So I don't want to forget about those as well when we say, hey, why is my quota changing? Why is my ramp changing? We're at a really early stage startup fairly early stage startup at Zangri, and we're talking about changing ramp. So I not just have to have, okay, I'm just gonna let's see, okay, let's go. But no, I'm looking at all of these other different data points and data models to making sure that I'm making a data-driven decision for comp, and that really builds a lot of trust. So trust, constant communication is really huge.
The trust thing is massive to me. I think my big two gotchas on comp plans is, one, put yourself in the rep's shoes and do the math for what it would take for her to be successful. So if you have a territory, how many ops do you have to create in that territory? What's your win rate? Can that person be very successful in the role? And is there anybody who, for some reason, you don't mathematically believe can be successful? And go through that process. And then the second to me would be really pressure test, anomalous deals and every type of deal. So you have what's the highest rate you could possibly pay a member of your team for hitting a deal. They sold a 3-year deal at 130% of quota with 3, new products in the market, and they're earning 34%, and they work their butt off to get 34%. Are you comfortable paying that amount of money? And then what happens if all of a sudden you get a $2 million deal? if your ASP is, you know, 80K or whatever. Like go through all of the variables and tie them together, and go to your VP of finance and say, would you be comfortable writing this check? And make sure that they would, because it's going to look really ugly if, you know, one of your reps sells a record-breaking deal for your company and then you're hemming and hawing about writing the check. You should be, if someone sold $1 million deal, I would be thrilled to write them their comp check, like every day. And that's something to keep in mind. And then make sure there's no gaming, there's no like incentive to not sell the deal right now. That's what I've seen with a lot of customers where, you know, they had a annual. They were actually, it made more sense for them, the rep mathematically, to sell monthly, because monthly was at a higher ARR than annual, and so they got a higher rate. And they made more money to sell monthly deals than annuals, right? Like make sure there's none of those like wins for gaming based on discounting.
Awesome. Well, we could keep going and going for hours, but I have to jump because I have an interview. So I have to interview. I hope I get the job. No, I'm interviewing. Well, thank you all so very much. This was wonderful. Everybody's LinkedIn is in the chat, and if we didn't get to your answers, apologies. You can reach out to us, and we'll answer those questions for you.